All right, shout out to my man, Rye Guy, over on the Patreon page. He wants to see a Penn State football schedule preview for the 2025 college football season. So we're going to do that today. I also had somebody in the comment section on the last schedule video we did ask for Penn State. So I figured we'd get that one knocked out here today. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. That's right, it is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. This is a series of videos I do every single offseason. We're going to go through a bunch of team schedules. These aren't prediction videos. I do those later in the year, middle to end of May, beginning of June. I'll start the game-by-game prediction videos. But part of putting together a prediction for a certain team or even like trying to pick conference winners or anything like that, part of what goes into making those predictions later in the offseason is understanding all the teams' schedules within a certain league, right? With expansion, with these conferences adding more teams to the league, you've ended up with a situation where you've got vastly different schedules within the same conferences, right? And it's always been that way to a certain degree, but obviously the more teams you add to a league, the more separated the schedules are going to become. And we saw that last year in both the Big Ten and the SEC, and I don't need to name them. You probably know off the top of your head some of the SEC or Big Ten teams or ACC or whoever, some of the teams who drew sort of a more difficult schedule, some of the teams that kind of avoided a lot of the better teams in the league, things like that. Let's fix this. It's bothering me. So it's a good idea to go through these schedules so you get a general idea of, okay, this team has a pretty tough schedule. Plus, maybe I don't think they're all that good, so probably going to have a record somewhere in this range here. That helps when you get ready to sit down and do prediction videos. At least for me, it does later in the year. So let's start out with Penn State here. Now, they have several non-con games to start the year, and unfortunately for college football fans like myself and across the country, there's nothing worth watching at all in the non-con this year for Penn State. They play Nevada, FIU, and Villanova in their first 3 games of the season. So just, it is what it is. It's a deadbeat of a schedule. I'm not picking on Penn State. There are several teams that, for whatever reason, whether it's cancellations because of the expansion or just poor scheduling, whatever the case, there are several teams across the country who just don't have any marquee non-con games. We see it in every single conference. It's not specific to the Big Ten or to Penn State, but in this particular, and Penn State has played big non-con games in the past, so it's not like Penn State is one of these teams that constantly avoids major non-con games, but it just so happens this year the non-con schedule is a complete joke. And Penn State fans, I think, would have to agree. I mean, as a Penn State fan, are you excited to watch these first 3 games of the season? I can tell you nobody else in the college football world is. Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. All 3 games at home to start the season, August 30th, September 6th, and September 13th, the first 3 Saturdays of the season. Then you get a bye week before maybe your most difficult game of the season. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe this is a good thing. It gives you a chance to sort of ramp up against some lower competition. Then you get a bye week to kind of assess where you're at before you have to host one of the best teams in the country or who's expected to be one of the best teams in the country next year, the Oregon Ducks, on September 27th. This will be one of the games of the year within the Big Ten and within all of college football. Now, of course, we have a 12-team playoff now. You don't need to win every game. You don't have to go undefeated. But this is a huge marquee game in the beginning of the season here, first month of the season here, September 27th, that'll give us an idea of where both teams are at for 2025, right? So huge game there at home against Oregon. Follow that up with a game on the road at UCLA. I think Penn State's probably a better team and a better program than UCLA. The only obstacle or potential obstacle you would see here with this game between Penn State and UCLA would be, number one, it comes right after the Oregon game. And a lot of times in college football, emotion plays a huge part in games. And so you've got a big emotional home game against Oregon. You've got to turn around the following week and travel all the way across the country and play a team where, you know, just, again, not picking on UCLA here. It's just a team not a lot of people pay attention to. So everyone will be talking about you heading into the Oregon game, and then win or lose, no one will be talking about the UCLA game. Potential trap spot there coming off of the Oregon game and having to travel all the way across the country to the West Coast to take on UCLA. Come back home, you play Northwestern, kind of a middling to below average team in the Big Ten in most years. Northwestern, kind of like Minnesota, several other teams that every 3 or 4 years, they seem to put together one of these seasons where they win 9 or 10 games and compete for what used to be a New Year's Six game. And Northwestern is one of those teams that, if you go back and look over the last 20 years, there's been a couple of times where they would have been contending for a 12-team playoff. Not suggesting that would be the case this year. You get them at home. Penn State would be a massive favorite. On the road at Iowa, another difficult road game here. Well, your first difficult road game, really. The first one, UCLA probably won't be a great team other than the travel and it coming after Oregon. Not much to worry about there. At Iowa, different story. Always has a really good defense. We'll see how they look offensively. Year 2 now of sort of the new offense that they're trying to run there under Kirk Ferentz after he finally fired his son as offensive coordinator. I thought the offense looked a little bit more innovative this past season. We'll see if they can take another couple of steps forward this coming year, but not an easy place to play on the road at Iowa. Then you get your second bye week. Now, as far as bye weeks go, I don't know if you could have handpicked them any better than this. You get them, your 2 toughest games, really, when you look at the schedule, I think, are Oregon and Ohio State, and you get a bye week before both of them. So extra time to prepare, heal up, rest your players, maybe get somebody back from injury that was hurt earlier in the season, whatever the case. Always good to have a bye week before one of these massive games. Now, unlike the Oregon game that you had at home, you do have to travel here and take on Ohio State in Columbus. And Ohio State's been kind of the thorn in Penn State's side, really, the entirety of James Franklin's career. He did beat them a couple of times, won the Big Ten back in 2016 or whatever it was. But this is the game every single year where most of the college football world looks at it and goes, well, this is the game Penn State's just not going to win. Kind of like when Georgia plays Alabama down in the SEC. It's almost to the point now where it doesn't even really matter who the better teams are in those matchups. You almost just chalk Alabama up as a win over Georgia. You chalk Ohio State up as a win over Penn State. Doesn't mean Penn State can't win the game, but this will be a tough one on the road in Columbus against the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. Come back home, play Indiana. I'll be honest, I don't know what to make of Indiana this year. They were obviously a remarkable story last year with first-year head coach Cignetti guiding them to the 12-team playoff. Just a historical season for Indiana. But that team was senior laden with a bunch of transfers, and they're doing that again this year. And if it works, Cignetti's proven he's a good enough coach that if he's got the players, he can maybe guide them to a 8+ win season, 9+ win season. I don't know that I would pick Indiana to contend for the playoffs again. I kind of need to see a team do it twice. I think in the era of the 12-team playoff, we're going to see a lot of Indianas. And I'm not even necessarily talking about how good or bad Indiana was, but you're going to see, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 teams that sort of have really good years, make the playoffs, and then kind of disappear into oblivion, and then you'll have sort of like that group of 4, 5, 6 teams that seems to be contending every single year, and you kind of know who those teams are, right? Your Georgias, Ohio States, Michigans in most years, Oregons, Bama, whatever teams you want to name. And then you'll have 5 or 6 Indianas that sort of get in one year, disappear for a few years. Maybe they make their way back up. I think TCU a couple of years ago, right? Somebody just comes in, has like a one and done type of year. So I don't really know what to expect of Indiana. I'm excited to watch him play this year to see if Cignetti can kind of repeat the success he had last year. But you get him at home, that's good. I would assume Penn State would be a favorite there. On the road at Michigan State. Another team that seems to be stuck in neutral lately. A couple of coaching changes in a 4 or 5 year period kind of set them back a little bit. Now, I do like the coach they brought in from Oregon State and had an okay year last year in his first year in a tough league. You have to play him there. We'll see. Tough, kind of a little bit of a tough road game there towards the last third of the season. And then you close things out at home against Nebraska and on the road at Rutgers. Now, these are 2 physical teams here. I think Penn State's more talented than both of these teams, but Dylan Raiola will be in year 2 as quarterback at Nebraska. Rules in year 3 now as head coach. Greg Schiano at Rutgers has proven to be a tough out from time to time. But again, 2 really physical games there to close out the season at home against Nebraska and on the road at Rutgers. So when you look at this schedule, obviously to me, 3 things stand out right away the minute you look at this schedule. Number 1 is the non-con. It's just a pitiful non-con schedule. Again, does it matter in the end? Probably not. If Penn State is 10-2, they're probably getting in the playoffs. If they're 9-3, they're probably not getting in. And I don't know that it matters who they play in those first 3 games, right? It's more what we've seen anyway. It's more about kind of how you end up at the end. And then, of course, the 2 huge games against Oregon and Ohio State. You get one at home, you get one on the road. You get a bye week before both of those games, which I think is great. Road games, when you look at the conference schedule, at UCLA, you should be favored. At Iowa, you'll probably be favored in that one too. At Ohio State, I would expect you to be an underdog, and then most likely favored at Michigan State and at Rutgers. So really that Ohio State game, the only really difficult road game. Again, the travel situation with UCLA and the fact that it does come right off the back of that home game against Oregon, which could be an emotional game, could potentially present some problems for Penn State there on October 4th on the road at UCLA. But overall, I think a pretty manageable schedule. Now, if you're going to have to play Oregon and Ohio State in the same season, best case scenario, they're spread out, which they are here, and you get a bye week before both of them, which you do here. So it appears to be a manageable schedule. If Penn State can find a way to split between Oregon and Ohio State, then I think they probably get in the playoffs, because they then could afford, obviously, to slip up anywhere else on this schedule, right? They'd be 10-2 with a win against either Oregon or Ohio State and would be almost a shoe-in to make the playoffs. Again, we'll see. Again, this isn't a prediction video. I'll get around to those in May or June. But there you go. Look at the 2025 college football schedule for the Penn State Nittany Lions. My buddy James Franklin, fresh off a playoff appearance. Let me know what you think about this schedule down below, and have a good morning.